Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the healing power of a warrior. Now, back in the day, warrior in Heavensward, Stormblood, that kind of stuff, it was always the highest damage tank, and it was also known to be a very defensive tank as well, because of all of the defensive nature that it has, and also the fact that you could go unchained inside Defiance, so that you wouldn't really get the penalty of being inside of your tank stance. And then also Inner Beast being readily available to you. Now, of course, going into Shadowbringers, all of the tanks had their own special spammable skill, so the old Inner Beast wasn't really that much of a signature move, I guess you could say. And also, Warrior's place has been kind of replaced by two other tanks. The highest DPS tank right now is Gunbreaker, and then the highest defensive tank, or the best defensive tank, I guess you could say, is now Dark Knight, well, in my opinion at least. Because of how strong the Blackest Knight is. So Warrior kind of lost its own identity. It's not the highest damage tank anymore, and it's also not the best defensive tank anymore. But where Warrior does shine right now in this expansion is the fact that it has a very high healing output. And you might be like, well, Mike, it doesn't heal that much. Like, you still have your equilibrium, which is nice and all. But outside of that, you don't necessarily always heal that much. And that is very true. But there are a few fights where Warrior really does shine, and that is also one of the reasons why I'm using my clear POV again from Alexander Ultimate, because in this Ultimate the first two phases, which are the most stressful on the healers, also introduce two bosses for both of the tanks to be tanking, meaning that Warrior does not only heal itself through the use of Nascent Flash, but they're also going to be healing their co-tank. And when you have fights like this where both of the tanks are taking a lot of damage, Leviathan is another good example, and E2 Savage to some extent, because both of the tanks are always taking double tank busters. But in fights where both of the tanks are tanking, it means that your Nascent Flash is always going to have a lot of value. Now, Nascent Flash is of course the replacement of Raw Intuition, so you have to make a choice in between the two of them, but pretty much any content in this game, this Ultimate included, does not really need Raw Intuition at all. I only used Raw Intuition, I think it's like 4 times in total in that fight, where like once is during downtime and 2 times it's to like buff a Shake It Off. Like there's only really 1 time where I really use Raw Intuition as a cooldown, and it's just to make sure that I survive. And after that I'm not even going to be tanking, so for the most part Nascent Flash will always be the replacement for Raw Intuition, because you do not need that extra mitigation from the Raw Intuition, meaning that it's usually better to use Nascent Flash to heal yourself up afterwards, after you've taken the damage, or just because you can heal yourself. Of course, because Warrior has such predictable and consistent burst through Inner Release and through Inner Chaos, you're actually going to be able to heal yourself quite a bit. So for those that don't know how Nascent Flash works exactly, basically you will be healed for the damage that you, like 50% of the damage that you deal. If you time Nascent Flash in the second half of your off GCD, you'll always be able to get 3 GCDs underneath the Nascent Flash buff, meaning that you can, if you do it with your Inner Release, you can get 3 Fell Cleaves, an Upheaval and an Onslaught underneath this buff, and if you time it together with your off, like burst, I guess you could say, where you save 2 Infuriate usages, and then a Beast Cage, you can get a Fell Cleave, 2 Inner Chaos, and 1 Upheaval underneath this Nascent Flash buff as well. Knowing this, you're about, like, I think your Nascent, like your Inner Chaos hit for about 50k, so do that times twice, that's already 50k HP, an Upheaval, a Fell Cleave in there, maybe like another 30k HP or something like that. So Warrior can heal itself quite a bit, especially in these scenarios. Now, as you can see in the gameplay as well, I always try to use my Nascent Flash for times where healing is also kind of stressful because there's other AoEs going out, or because the healers are doing something else. Like, for example, first one I use, very simple, it's just there to heal myself up for the tank buster, and then the healers can just focus on doing damage during their opener. Second time I use it, it's a very bad usage because I don't really have any burst right there. The only burst that I have is a Fell Cleave, but that isn't even guaranteed a crit, so that's not really the best usage either. But on the other hand, I don't need my Raw Intuition there, so I might as well use the Nascent Flash, because if I hold on to it too long, then I'm also not going to have it for the next part of my burst, which is that double Inner Chaos window. Then next one, double Inner Chaos, this is where the healers are moving out, moving in, and where everybody's getting hit by those cleaves, but the tanks are still getting hit by auto attacks as well. So there is really valuable that I have both the damage reduction on my co-tank, who's still taking autos, and then also the healing that we're getting as well. And then last but not least, we have that final in release window during the first phase at least of Pepsi Man, where both the tanks are still taking autos, but the healers are busy removing the exhaust debuff, I believe it's called, like the thing that you have to Esena of your party members. So that's where healers can't heal the tanks, so that's where I kind of take over the healing of the tanks, so to speak, with my Nascent Flash. And the same goes for the second phase. I basically try to use Nascent Flash wherever possible, trying to line it up with Burst if possible. I ended up using Raw Intuition for a big part of our prog, but then at some point I was like, you know what, I'm going to change something with my cooldowns. I'm going to be a little bit less like defensive for the double rocket punch at the end, but I am going to be able to heal more, and I'll probably be a little bit more defensive for some other stuff that happens as well. And they ended up thinking it was really good, because when I changed it, they had to spend less heals on me, and that's essentially what it is all about. Since Warrior kind of lost its place as the top DPS, it kind of got a new place where the DPS that you are missing is now being given to the healers, because they have to spend less heals on you. Of course, I know for some people this might not really sound all that alluring, because usually people like to look at the parser and go like, oh, my DPS was the highest, this is really fun. But whenever I play Warrior, especially in fights like the Ultimate, I like to just go from the damage tab to that healing tab and see how much healing I was able to contribute to our party. And it's definitely not negligible. I think in our Ultimate clear, I'll put it on screen as well if I don't forget, I had about 10% of all the healing done in the fight, which is quite a bit considering that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both of my healers had like 10,000 heals per second, where I as the Warrior had like 2,000 heals per second. So if you just put it a bit in retrospect as to what like an actual healer is doing and what you as a tank is doing, which is basically free healing, because you're not losing anything for it. The only thing you're losing is a Raw Intuition, which is usually not even needed for you to survive through tank busters and that kind of stuff. So not only are you taking off a burden of the healers by making it so that you heal both yourself as well as your co-tank, you're also giving your co-tank 10% mitigation, which in some parts of the fight is also really useful. Like for example, the last two Nascent Flashes I use, or no, actually the last three that I use in the fight are, one is covering the Thunder AoE being passed to my co-tank, the other, and that is also during a Whirlwind, I believe, or just after a Whirlwind. Then the next one is for the double rocket punch, and then the one after that is for a Whirlwind AoE. So it's all parts where both me and my co-tank are taking a lot of damage, and I'm healing both myself, but I'm also giving that 10% mitigation to my co-tank. So when I first looked at Nascent Flash, I was very underwhelmed about it, because it's like, well, it's only 10%, and if you look at it, the other thing that comes close to it is Paladin's Intervention, which is also 10%, but you're always going to be able to buff that by using Rampart or Sentinel. And then the other thing close to it would be Gunbreaker, which is only 15%, but that can be slightly buffed by using the Solid Barrel Shield that you have. So technically speaking, like on paper, it looks like the weakest, but Nascent Flash is actually incredibly strong when you think about pairing it up with your burst damage and seeing how much you can, of course, help out your co-tank as well as your healers by healing both yourself as well as the co-tank, especially in fights where both of the tanks are taking damage. If it is only a fight where you only are taking damage or only your co-tank are taking damage, then it's not as like good, I guess you could say. But in fights like this, in the Ultimate for example, it is incredibly viable to have that extra healing. Of course, Nascent Flash is not the only healing that Warrior has. You still have your Thrill of Battle, which also gives you that 20% heal buff, and then you also still have that Equilibrium, which also comes in clutch in certain scenarios in the fight, as well, as you can see. So it's basically new Warrior. You might not be doing as much damage anymore, but you make up for that lost damage by giving your healers more damage, by basically saving them certain heals and that kind of stuff, and meaning that when they have to heal you less, they can deal more damage, or they can save certain healing cooldowns like Tetra, Benediction, whatever else you have, Lustrate, that kind of stuff, for other stuff or for other parts in the fight to make it all a bit safer. So that's kind of my take on the new Warrior. I am actually really enjoying this new playstyle. It might not be the highest DPS anymore, it might not be the most defensive style of play anymore, but you're basically like a kind of healer right now. So I think New Warrior is really cool. If people had kind of their like opinions about not really liking the New Warrior because of these reasons, I totally get that as well. I used to be one of them when Shadowbringers first came out, but then as soon as I started playing around with Nascent Flash, I kind of fell in love with the job again. So that's one of the reasons why I played Warrior for this Ultimate, because some people were asking about it, like, Mike, why are you playing Warrior for Ultimate instead of Gunbreaker? Well, there you have the reason, just because I wanted to support my team a little bit more. Because Gunbreaker is a lot weaker when it comes to being defensively strong in that fight. Of course, you still have your extra, like your camouflage and that kind of stuff, which Gunbreaker is still fine in that fight, to be honest, but it is going to be a little bit more stressful on your healers, whereas with Warrior I am able to take off some of that stress so that they can focus more on doing mechanics and learning the fight while I keep myself alive. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Talk a little bit about Warrior, because it is one of my OG tank jobs that I used to play back in Heavensward and Stormblood, and it's kind of making a return on me. It's growing back on me again, even though of course Gunbreaker is still my favorite by far. But Warrior is definitely the second in rank when it comes to what I enjoy playing the most. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.